I knew something was wrong before I even turned off the truck. That kind of feeling hits your gut before your brain catches up, like your body sees the problem before your eyes do. I pulled up the gravel lane toward my place and saw dust hanging in the afternoon air, thick and drifting in the sunlight. And then I saw a pickup truck rolling straight across the front edge of my property, like it had every right in the world to be there. By the time I stepped out, I was staring at 20 feet of missing fence and a stretch of freshly graded dirt cut clean through land my family had owned for nearly 50 years. They thought they could steal access to my driveway and save themselves a fortune. What they ended up costing themselves was a whole lot more than money. My name's Caleb Mercer. I live outside Briar Ridge, Tennessee, in a little patch of hillside that sits off a county road most people pass without noticing. 14 acres, mostly slope and hardwood trees, a small workshop behind the house, and one long gravel driveway winding down to the road. That driveway matters more than most people would understand. It's my only legal access point. My grandfather built it with his own tractor and a borrowed dump trailer sometime in the 70s. He packed the gravel himself and laid every drainage ditch by hand. Growing up, I spent summers helping him patch washouts after storms and clear branches after wind came through. That driveway wasn't just rock and dirt. It was the reason the property functioned at all. Life out there had always been quiet. The kind of quiet where mornings start with coffee on the porch and you hear birds instead of traffic. The kind of quiet where neighbors wave from half a mile away and nobody shows up unless they've got a reason. Then Horizon Bluff Development bought the land south of mine. It happened fast. One week, there was an old neglected hillside full of brush and deer trails. Next week, survey ribbons started appearing on trees, then excavators, then crews hauling lumber and steel beams. They put up signs advertising luxury mountain cabins with panoramic valley views and investment opportunities. City money, fancy renderings, weekend getaway homes for people who liked nature as long as it had granite countertops. I mostly kept to myself, but about 3 months in, a guy named Nolan Pierce came by. Nolan was their site manager. Mid-40s, expensive boots that looked too clean for the dirt, mirrored sunglasses, the kind of smile that always feels rehearsed. He knocked on my front door one Saturday while I was staining a workbench. He looked past me toward the driveway and said, "That road yours?" I said, "Far as I know." He laughed. "Nice stretch. Pretty direct. Gets me where I need to go." He nodded like he appreciated that answer. Then he asked if I'd ever considered paving it. I told him no. Then he asked if I'd ever considered sharing access with the development. That made me stop moving. I leaned against the porch rail and looked at him. "No," he smiled. "Didn't mean anything by it. Just figured it might benefit both of us. Easier access. Maybe we upgrade the whole thing." I said, "That driveway was built for one household." He shrugged. "Can't blame a man for asking." Then he left. Real polite. Real casual. But something about that conversation sat wrong with me the rest of the day. My neighbor Martha noticed it too. Martha lives across the road in a white farmhouse with 3 dogs and binoculars she treats like a second set of eyes. That evening she called me. "You trust that man?" "No good," she said. "Because I saw him standing at your fence line with one of his crew this afternoon, pointing around like he was measuring furniture." That didn't help. Still, I figured maybe they were pushing boundaries the way developers always do. Ask for more than they expect to get. Try charm first. Then 2 weeks later I drove into town for hardware and diesel fuel. Nothing unusual. Took maybe 90 minutes. I came back around the bend, and my stomach dropped so hard it felt like somebody hit the brakes inside my chest. The fence line beside my driveway was gone. Not bent. Not damaged. Gone. Post ripped out. Chain link missing. And where my fence used to be was a perfectly leveled strip of dirt running toward Horizon Bluff's construction site. Orange flags. Fresh grading marks. Tire tracks. My driveway widened and blended right into their work zone like it had been planned that way all along. And then, just to make it worse, a flatbed loaded with framing lumber came barreling through the opening, crossed the edge of my property, and headed straight toward the cabins. The driver looked right at me. Didn't slow down. Didn't wave. Nothing. Dust kicked up around my boots. For a second I honestly couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the ground where my grandfather's fence posts had stood for 20 years and trying to understand how anybody had the nerve. Then my phone was already in my hand. Nolan answered on the second ring. Bright voice. Relaxed. "Hey, Caleb," I said. Did your crew just tear down my fence? Small pause. Then he said, we improved access. I looked at the tire tracks cutting through my land. You ripped out private fencing and built a road. He sighed. Let's not make this dramatic. That sentence right there. That's when the anger really hit. He kept talking. We've got heavy equipment coming through. The road on our south side isn't practical. Your driveway's already there. It benefits both of us. No, it benefits you. We can work something out. You already did. Without asking. He went quiet for a second, then his voice changed. Less friendly. Caleb, don't turn this into something bigger than it needs to be. I stared at my missing fence. At the orange flags. At a bulldozer idling on land nobody had permission to touch. And I said, too late. Then I hung up. And I made one call I probably should have made sooner. To a man named Grant Holloway. Grant had been handling county land filings and title work in Briar Ridge longer than I'd been alive. He'd known my grandfather, been at his funeral, helped my dad settle the estate. I sent him photos. Didn't even finish explaining before he cut in. Caleb, don't touch anything. Don't move a truck. Don't pull a stake. I'm heading to my office now. I asked, you think they crossed the line? He gave a short laugh. From what I'm looking at, son, I think they sprinted over it. And that was the moment everything changed. By the time I got to Grant's office, the sun was dropping behind the ridge, and the whole town had that late evening glow over it. Storefront windows lit up, trucks heading home, everybody winding down. Except Grant. He already had half the county records spread across his desk. Plat maps, survey copies, deed records, so old some of the corners were yellow. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Just tapped one of the papers with his finger. Your grandfather recorded this easement in 1978. County approved. Survey pins marked. Access route established and protected. Then he tapped another map. Horizon Bluff bought parcels 62 south of you. Their legal entrance is here. Different road. Opposite side of the hill. Not mine. I leaned over his desk. Then why the hell are they using my driveway? Grant adjusted his glasses. Because rerouting through the legal entrance costs money. That answer made my jaw tighten. He kept going. Using yours saves grading, saves drainage work, saves permitting, saves time. Probably figured they could push first and settle later. And if I said no? He looked up at me finally. They were betting you wouldn't know what they touched. That hit harder than I expected. Because he was probably right. If my dad hadn't drilled property lines into my head growing up, if my grandfather hadn't treated that driveway like sacred ground, maybe I would have hesitated. Maybe I would have let Nolan smooth talk his way through it. Grant grabbed his phone. I'm filing emergency injunctive relief and calling county planning. Tonight. Absolutely tonight. Then he looked at me and smiled. And Caleb, don't worry. People who bulldoze first usually panic when paperwork starts moving. The next morning at 8 sharp, County Inspector Lydia Ramsey pulled onto my property in a white county SUV. Lydia had the kind of presence that made construction crews suddenly stand straighter. Small woman. Sun hat. Tablet in one hand. GPS unit in the other. No wasted movement. No wasted words. By then Horizon Bluff's crew was already on site. Framers unloading lumber. A skid steer moving gravel. Concrete truck backing in. Like none of this was ever going to be questioned. Nolan spotted Lydia's county badge and came striding over fast. Big smile. Trying confidence. Morning. Didn't realize we were expecting inspection. Lydia didn't smile back. Good thing I was nearby. That woman had perfect timing. She walked the line with me and Grant. Checked survey pins. Measured the grading. Verified coordinates. Took pictures. Every orange flag they planted. Every tire mark. Every inch of disturbed ground. All on my side. Every bit of it. Nolan kept hovering. Trying to jump in. There may been a misunderstanding. Lydia raised one finger without even looking at him. He stopped talking. Then she walked to the center of the opening where my fence used to be and stood there studying her screen. Wind moving through the trees. Workers pretending not to stare. Nolan shifting his weight. And then Lydia looked up. Mr. Pierce, who authorized removal of this fencing? Nolan swallowed. Our team was under the impression access was being negotiated. I almost laughed. Negotiated? That was rich. Lydia asked, do you have written permission? No survey. No recorded access agreement. He hesitated. No, Lydia nodded like she already knew. Then she looked over at the bulldozer parked halfway across my boundary. Then your equipment is trespassing and your grading operation is unauthorized. That sentence landed like a hammer. Nolan changed tone immediately. Come on now. We're trying to keep the project moving. This can be worked out. Lydia looked at him. No. What can happen now is you stop. She turned and called her assistant over. Within 15 minutes, bright red stop work notices were posted across the site. One on the gate, one on the grading equipment, one nailed to a temporary support beam. Everything stopped. Literally. A truck hauling roofing supplies pulled up and got turned around. Concrete pour canceled. Crew standing around confused. One guy sat on a cooler eating chips watching Nolan unravel in real time. And Nolan, man, he looked like somebody unplugged him. He followed Lydia around trying every version of charm and pressure he could think of. At one point he lowered his voice and said, "This delay is going to be expensive." Lydia didn't miss a beat. Should have been cheaper than trespassing. Grant coughed into his hand because he was trying not to laugh. Then things got worse. For Horizon Bluff, anyway. Because county planning dug deeper. Turns out the road Nolan was legally supposed to use on the south side crossed drainage runoff that required culvert permits and environmental review. That was exactly why they ignored it. Too expensive. Too slow. Too much paperwork. So instead they gambled. Tear out my fence. Use my access. Push construction far enough ahead that I'd feel pressured to settle. Maybe offer me some money. Maybe promise paving. Maybe make it feel easier to say yes than fight. Problem was, they misread me completely. And they definitely misread Grant. By that afternoon, he had a property damage claim drafted. Fence replacement. Land restoration. Unauthorized use. Equipment trespass. And because my driveway had become active construction access, he included damages for interference with legal entry. Nolan came to my porch that evening. No sunglasses. No smile. Tie loosened. Dust on his boots for once. He stood there while I leaned against the rail. "Caleb," he said quietly. "We can resolve this privately." I said nothing. He kept going. "We can replace the fencing. Improve the drive. Compensate you." I looked toward the construction site where the red notices were flapping in the breeze. Then back at him. "You had your chance. This doesn't need to go further." It already did. He rubbed his face. "You don't understand what rerouting this project means." I said, "You didn't understand what tearing out my fence meant." That shut him up. Then he tried one last thing. "This impacts a lot of people." That one almost got me. Because it was designed to make me feel guilty. Like I was hurting workers. Like I was the obstacle. But standing there looking at that man after everything, I realized something. People like Nolan count on that. They count on regular folks not wanting conflict. Count on politeness. Count on you second-guessing yourself while they move dirt and call it progress. So I told him the truth. "I didn't touch your project. You touched mine." He stared at me for a second, then nodded once. Tight jaw. Turned around. Walked back toward his trucks. And the next morning county planning made their official decision. Horizon Bluff Development was ordered to remove every bit of grading from my property, restore the boundary, rebuild the fence, and permanently reroute all vehicle access to the Southern County Road entrance listed in their original filing. A quarter-mile farther. Across unstable slope. Straight through the expensive part they'd tried so hard to avoid. When Grant called with the update, he sounded almost cheerful. "Caleb, they're going to need a new culvert permit, fresh environmental review, and another grading application." "How long?" "Best case? For months." I stood on the porch with coffee in my hand, watching workers pull stakes out of my yard. And for the first time all week, I smiled. Because Nolan had tried to save time by stealing access from one stubborn homeowner. And now the county was about to make sure that shortcut became the most expensive detour Horizon Bluff had ever seen. For the next few weeks, I had a front row seat to something I honestly never expected to enjoy that much. Watching Horizon Bluff undo their own mess. Every morning I'd step out with coffee and see crews pulling gravel back out of the strip they carved through my land. Orange flags disappeared. Tire tracks got leveled. The bulldozer that had rolled across my driveway like it owned the place now sat parked near the gate, while workers rebuilt drainage where they should have started in the first place. And right where my fence used to be, new steel posts. Fresh chain link. Concrete set clean and straight. Martha came over one afternoon carrying banana bread like she was delivering refreshments to a sporting event. She stood beside me at the fence line and watched a crew struggle with a post hole digger. Then she smiled and said, "I've lived here 32 years, and I gotta say this is one of the more satisfying Tuesdays I've had." I laughed harder than I had in days. The truth is, once the anger settled, what hit me most was relief. Because until all this happened, I didn't realize how vulnerable land can feel. People think ownership is simple. A deed, a boundary, a signature. But when somebody with money and machines decides your fence is optional and your driveway is convenient, for a minute there it really can feel like your voice doesn't count. That part stayed with me. More than the dust. More than the legal paperwork. That feeling of standing in your own yard wondering how bold someone has to be to act like your home is just another line item. Then the reroute started. And that's where the bill got ugly. The legal entrance on Horizon Bluff's south side crossed a low drainage channel that fed rainwater downhill. The county required culvert work before heavy trucks could pass. Soil testing found erosion risk on part of the slope. Environmental review flagged runoff concerns. Everything stacked. Every delay feeding the next one. Excavators sat idle. Materials got rescheduled. Subcontractors shifted to other jobs. And because buyers had already put deposits on those cabin lots, the pressure got worse. Fast. One afternoon, I drove into Briar Ridge Hardware and heard two contractors talking near the lumber aisle. One of them said Horizon Bluff was bleeding money every week. The other said investors were furious. Apparently city buyers don't love hearing mountain retreat coming soon when the mountain's tied up in county review. A few days later, Nolan showed up again. Different man this time. No polished confidence. No sales pitch. Just tired eyes and a folder under one arm. I met him at the porch. He stood there for a second before speaking. I wanted to apologize. That surprised me. He looked down toward the driveway. I pushed too hard. I thought if we made enough progress, everybody would settle and move forward. I said, "You thought I'd fold." He gave a small nod. "Yeah. Honest, finally." Then he handed me the folder. Inside was documentation for fence replacement and land restoration, paid in full. No arguments. No conditions. He said, "Corporate's replacing me after this quarter." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to enjoy it. Part of me actually felt bad. Because underneath all the arrogance and bad decisions, Nolan looked like a man who'd bet everything on forcing momentum and watched it all collapse. He glanced toward the ridge where equipment was working the new route. "You know what the investors keep asking?" "What?" He gave a tired laugh. "How one driveway cost us 6 figures." I looked at him. And before I could stop myself, I said, "It wasn't the driveway." He nodded. He knew exactly what I meant. It was the assumption that land without immediate resistance becomes available. That somebody quieter must be easier to move. That if enough trucks show up fast enough, ownership gets blurry. He shook my hand and left. And that was the last time I saw him. By late fall, the new access road was finally complete. Longer by nearly a quarter mile. Fresh culvert. New grading. Guardrails. All permitted. All inspected. All expensive. And nowhere near my land. My fence stood exactly where it always belonged. The grass along the disturbed strip grew back thicker than before. Leaves started turning gold across the ridge. And one evening I parked near the bottom of the driveway after hauling supplies home and just sat there with the engine off. Quiet. Wind moving through trees. Gravel under the tires. The same driveway my grandfather built with sweat and stubbornness 50 years ago. I thought about him then. How he used to say, "A boundary doesn't need to be loud to matter." At the time I was a kid. Didn't really understand. Now I did. A month later, Martha yelled from across the road while walking her dogs. "Hey, Caleb." I waved. She pointed toward the development. "Think they learned anything?" I looked at the cabins up on the ridge. Crews finally finishing trim work. Buyers touring model units. All of it moving again, slower than planned and way more expensive than expected. Then I looked back at my driveway, my fence, my land, and I said, "Depends." On what? Whether next time they knock first. That made her laugh. And honestly, maybe that's the part one still think about. Because I get why some folks might say I should have worked something out. Taken the paved driveway. Accepted a deal. Maybe everybody saves time. Maybe everybody wins. But I also know what would have happened if I let it slide. That opening in the fence would have become permanent. The road gets busier. Construction turns into traffic. Traffic turns into entitlement. And one day you wake up realizing you didn't lose land all at once. You lost it a little at a time because saying no felt inconvenient. So I'm curious what you think. If somebody tore through your property claiming it helped both of you, would you have settled and made a deal? Or would you have pushed back and let the county sort it out? Did Nolan deserve the fallout? Or did the punishment go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I can tell you one thing for sure. Around here, every time I drive down that gravel road and hear the tires crunch under me, it still feels real good knowing the shortcut they tried to steal turned into the detour they'll probably never forget.